We're back for video number 2. In our first video for this chapter, Ecce Romani 42, we saw some examples and started to think about what this subjunctive means. And we saw two examples. We saw an imperfect subjunctive and we saw a pluperfect subjunctive. So be sure you're okay with those before you go on to this video. But in this video, we're going to learn how do we make these. How do we come up with the forms of the imperfect and the pluperfect subjunctive. So let's start with the imperfect. The way we're going to make this is by adding the personal endings to the present active infinitive. Let's explain, clarify. Personal endings, well, that's just MST, most is, unt, the I, you, he, she, it, we, all, they, that we know very well. And the present active infinitive, that's the second principal part of a verb, the infinitive, the present active infinitive. So it's actually pretty easy. If you think about it, you take the infinitive and you add MST, most is, unt, and you then have an imperfect active subjunctive. Here's our chart. This is the chart from the book, and here are the imperfect subjunctives actives for each of our model verbs from the 4 conjugations. So let's look through this a little bit. First conjugation, our verb is porto. The infinitive is portare. So then we add MST, most is, unt, to give us portarem, portares, portaret, portaremus, portaretis, portarent. How do we translate this? Portarem is I was carrying. It's imperfect, so that continued action is still there. Portares, you were carrying. He was carrying, or she. We were carrying. Y'all were carrying. They were carrying. It's still imperfect. What's the difference between this and a regular imperfect with ba? Well, this, like we said in that first video, this subjunctive deals with things, actions of verbs that are potential. And if that still doesn't make sense, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We're just kind of slowly introducing that concept. It's going to come more into play starting especially with our next video and as we continue to learn subjunctives. But for this video, we wanted to learn how to make these. Moving to that second conjugation, our verb moveo does mean to move. Take the infinitive movere, add MST, most is, unt, and so those endings and forms should look pretty self-explanatory. Same for the third IO, and fourth. Let's change this really quickly. Here's the infinitives for those verbs: portare, movere, mittere, jacere, and audire throughout the whole chart. All we do to make that imperfect subjunctive active is add MST, most is, unt. And then again, translation-wise, for any of these verbs, it's I, you, he, she, it, we, y'all, they, were carrying, moving, sending, throwing, hearing. So the was or were and then the ing, imperfect subjunctives. How about for the verb to be? The verb to be, sum esse fui futurus, we just do the same thing. We take the second principal part, the present active infinitive, esse, and we add MST, most is, unt. So essem, esses, esset, essemus, essetis, essent. I was, you were, he, she, it was. We were, y'all were, they were. So it's subjunctive. It's imperfect. Notice here, just like in the previous screen, the E on the end of the infinitive is long in the second person singular as well as the first person plural and the second person plural. And that's always going to be the case for any imperfect subjunctive. So that's that. Go back and re-watch it if you need to, but it's pretty straightforward. This is actually, these imperfect subjunctives are extremely easy to recognize and put together the forms. Probably the easiest of any of the subjunctives we're going to learn. Let's move on to pluperfect. We're going to make a pluperfect subjunctive active by adding the same personal endings to the perfect active infinitive. So MST, most is, unt goes on the end of the perfect active infinitive. Where do we get that? Well, that was the previous chapter in the book. We take the perfect stem and we add isse. So, interestingly, you can't learn the pluperfect subjunctive without knowing the perfect active infinitive. That's why it comes in the chapter before this. Man, they think of everything, don't they? So, let's take our 4 verbs and let's just get our third principal parts up there. Portavi, movi, misi, yeki, and audivi. We start with those, and we need to make a perfect active infinitive. So we're going to drop off those final i's to give us a perfect stem, and then we add isse. So here, these forms now are perfect active infinitives. How do we translate? Just a quick recap. Portavisse, to have carried. Movisse, to have moved. To have sent, to have thrown, to have heard, right? But we all knew that, so let's move on. Then with these perfect active infinitives, we just need to add MST, most is, unt. So if we do that for porto, we get this: portavisem, portavises, portaviset, portavisemos, portavisetis, portavisent. It's pluperfect, so had needs to be in the translation. Portavisem, I had carried. You had carried, portavises. He, she, it had carried. We had carried. Y'all had carried. They had carried. Pretty simple. It's a few more steps than the imperfect subjunctive active, but not that many. If you know how to make the perfect active infinitive, which I would hope you do, because that's easy enough, it's just one more step, and it's an easy step at that. So let's turn our attention to that next column, the second conjugation. Take a second, grab a pencil and paper, and see if you can come up with the 6 forms for the pluperfect subjunctive active for moveo, for that second conjugation verb. Pause the video if you need to. But there we go. Movisem, movises, moviset, movisemos, movisetis, movisent. This is I had moved for the translation, and so on. So again, pretty straightforward. If we go ahead and fill out the rest of the chart, we get this, and you can look over those forms, but the paradigm is the same for any of the 4 conjugations, including IO verbs, so yakio, yakare, yaki for the third principal part, yekisem, yekises, and so on. Hopefully this chart makes a lot of sense. It should. If you've been following along the last couple chapters, this should be pretty straightforward. How about the verb to be? Well, we need to turn our attention to that third principal part, which is fui. Drop the long I, add issa, and then msemos desuet. So fuisem, fuises, fuiset, fuisemos, fuisetis, fuisent. I had been for fuisem. You had been. He or she or it had been. Fuisemos, we had been. Fuisetis, y'all had been. Fuisent, they had been. This is actually kind of common. You will see this. So we definitely want to be comfortable and familiar with these 6 forms, the pluperfect subjunctive of the verb to be. So an assignment for guys in my class. What I want you to do is email me. You don't have to write this out. Let's be green. Let's decrease our carbon footprint. Email me the imperfect and pluperfect subjunctives, so all 6 forms for each. That's 12 total. For this verb, muso, musara, musavi, musatos, which means mutter. So the 6 forms of the imperfect subjunctive, the 6 of the pluperfect. Please email this to me before class tomorrow. As a hint, what's coming up? A lot of these charts in class, so that we are absolutely 100% good to go on making these forms. If you're confused, if you need some help, go back and rewatch the video. Go back and rewatch that first video. That's going to be important when we hit video 3 coming up here. But for right now, if you're not good with video 2, watch it again, watch it a 3rd time if you need to, so you're good to go.